The moment I heard my husband laugh in Polish and say, "He'll sign it. He always signs it," my stomach turned cold, because I understood every word, and when his boss replied, "Good." Once he's legally tied to the baby and the debt, he can't escape. I realized my marriage wasn't falling apart. It had been engineered to collapse on me. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Quick question before we jump in. From which city and country are you watching? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you're into stories about betrayal, justice, and the moment a underestimated person finally stops playing nice, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, because this one gets methodical. Alright, let me take you back to Portland, Maine, where salty air, old brick streets, and lighthouse postcards couldn't distract me from the fact that the person I trusted most had been quietly setting my life on fire. I wasn't supposed to be at that fundraising gala. That's the funny part. If my coworker hadn't called in sick, if the catering company hadn't mixed up the delivery schedule, if I hadn't volunteered to swing by the venue to save the day, I might have stayed blissfully ignorant for another month. But I did show up. I walked into the Harborside Maritime Museum in a suit that never quite sat right on my shoulders, surrounded by people who looked like they'd been born wearing money. The place smelt like polished wood, champagne, and that sweet chemical bite of fresh floral arrangements. And there he was. Miles, my husband. The man who used to text me pictures of ridiculous dog statues in shop front windows. The man who cried when we signed the papers for our old Victorian house on Munjoy Hill. The man who insisted on leaving the porch light on whenever I worked late. "So you always come home to warmth," he used to say. Miles was standing near the silent auction table with his boss, Raina Vaughn. Raina wasn't just a boss in the normal sense. She ran Vaughn Shore Capital, one of those boutique firms that spoke in phrases like portfolio synergy and emerging market leverage, then acted surprised when regular people couldn't afford groceries. She was the kind of woman whose smile felt like a handshake you didn't want. Perfect teeth, perfect hair, perfect posture. Her dress was the color of deep red wine, and she wore confidence like perfume. Miles looked different around her. Not happier, not more alive, just smaller. Like a moon orbiting something massive. I kept my distance. I didn't want to be the clingy spouse hovering at his work events. Miles hated that. He called it making things awkward. He'd learnt that phrase from Raina. I went to the back hall, checked on the vendor delivery, and when I returned, I realized I'd left my phone at the coat check. I turned down the side corridor where the museum kept its office doors. Quiet, dim, away from the crowd. That's where I heard them, not in English, in Polish. I froze so hard my shoes seemed glued to the tile. Miles said something, quick and soft, like a secret wrapped in silk. On podpis. Zauge podpisuje. He'll sign it. He always signs it. Raina's reply came with a laugh, light, amused, like she was talking about a cute puppy doing tricks. Already ni uciekni. Dogi jeko. Dwa hachaiki. Then he won't escape. The debt and the baby. 2 hooks. My throat tightened. My skin prickled like I'd stepped into freezing water. Because I wasn't guessing. I wasn't translating badly. I wasn't hearing what I wanted. I was fluent. And in that corridor, listening to my husband and his boss discuss trapping me like an animal, I realized something awful. They didn't think I could understand them. Which meant they'd been hiding the truth in plain sound, and I had just walked into it. I backed away before they could see me, heart hammering so hard it felt like it would crack my ribs. The gala music thumped faintly through the walls, cheerful and oblivious. I found my phone, walked out into the cold Maine night, and sat in my car staring at the steering wheel like it might explain what debt and baby had to do with me, because Miles and I didn't have a baby. Not yet. But suddenly, I wasn't sure we ever would, and the question that clawed up my spine was simple and terrifying. What exactly had I already signed without knowing it? Let me tell you who I was before that hallway. I'm Evan Calder, 36 years old, electrical engineer by trade, specialized in maritime power systems, the kind that keep ferry docks alive through nor'easters and ice. I'm not flashy, I'm not big money, but I'm steady. The kind of man who pays bills early and keeps spare batteries in the junk drawer. Miles came into my life like a song you don't realize you needed. We met in Boston at a conference, one of those exhausting events with name tags and lukewarm coffee. He was there with a finance group, wearing a blazer too expensive for the room, and when he laughed, he covered his mouth like he was embarrassed to exist. That should have been my first clue. He had this way of making himself seem small so other people could feel big. We started dating long distance. Weekend trains. Late night calls. The kind of romance built on anticipation, on planning, on the belief that the future was something you could design if you loved each other hard enough. Miles told me he'd grown up with a mother who drifted through boyfriends and apartment leases like smoke. He said stability was his love language. He said he wanted a home so badly it hurt. I believed him, because I recognized that hunger. My parents divorced when I was 13, and I spent my teenage years trying to be so responsible that nobody would leave again. I became the kid who did dishes without being asked, who got good grades, and who fixed the neighbor's broken porch light just to feel useful. Usefulness is a quiet addiction. Nobody warns you. Miles and I got married at City Hall in Portland. No huge wedding, just a handful of friends, my mother crying into a tissue, and Miles gripping my hand like he was afraid the world would snatch me away if he let go. We bought our house 6 months later. A tall, narrow Victorian with creaky stairs, and a view of the harbor if you leaned out the second-floor window. The kind of house that felt like a promise. We'll build something here. We'll be a real family. And yes, we wanted a child. That part matters. In our second year of marriage, Miles started talking about surrogacy like it was an inevitable next step. He made spreadsheets. He joined forums. He bookmarked clinics. He'd show me pictures of nurseries on Instagram and say, "This one feels like us. I was cautious. I wasn't against it, just careful." Surrogacy is expensive, complicated, and emotionally heavy. I wanted to do it right. I wanted us stable, prepared, aligned. Miles always said, "Of course, we'll do it right," and that's where Raina came in. Miles got recruited by Vaughn Shore Capital after a networking event. He came home glowing, talking about growth and opportunity and how Raina sees my potential. At first, I was happy for him. I'd watched him work temp jobs and grind through night classes. This was the life he wanted, polished, respected, upward. But the job changed him, not overnight. Slowly, like water wearing down stone. He started dressing differently, sharper, more expensive. He began criticizing small things. My shirts weren't professional, my laugh was too loud, and my friends were a little casual. He also started disappearing on Thursdays. Client dinners, he'd say. Compliance meetings, investor cocktails, always Thursday, like a ritual. And if I asked for details, he'd sigh like I'd asked him to explain gravity. "You wouldn't get it," he'd say. "It's industry stuff that should have made me angry. Instead, it made me try harder. I cooked better dinners. I cleaned the house like we were staging it for a magazine." I started learning about his world, finance jargon, market news, so I could be someone he didn't have to translate for. I thought I was being a supportive partner. Now I know I was being trained. And here's the part I never told Miles, because it seemed irrelevant, like an old childhood party trick. I speak Polish, fluently. My grandmother, Babcia Teresa, lived in Chicago's old Polish neighborhood. Every summer, she practically kidnapped me for 6 weeks. No English allowed. She made pierogi, watched old movies, and snapped her fingers at me if I answered in the wrong language. Education, she'd say, tapping my forehead, is the thing nobody can steal. I carried that fluency quietly into adulthood. It never came up in Portland. It never mattered. Until it did. And in that museum hallway, when I heard debt and baby, my entire marriage rearranged itself in my head like a puzzle suddenly missing the centerpiece. Because Miles and I had been talking about a baby, and lately he'd been pushing harder than ever, pressuring me to sign papers, approve transfers, and move money for deposits. I'd been signing because I trusted him, because I loved him, because I thought we were building something together. So when I sat in my car that night with the heater blasting and my hands shaking, the question wasn't just, is he cheating? It was worse. It was, how far has he already gone, and how much of my life did I accidentally hand him? I didn't go home right away. I drove to a 24-hour diner off Route 1, one of those places where the coffee tastes burnt, the booths stick to your skin, and nobody asks questions. The kind of place that exists for people who don't want to be seen breaking. I slid into a corner booth and stared at my phone. 6 missed calls from Miles. 3 texts. The first one, where did you go? The second, everything okay? The third, please call me. Raina needs to talk to you about something. That last line made my stomach flip. Raina needs to talk to you. Why would my husband's boss need to talk to me at midnight unless I was part of whatever hooks they'd been discussing? I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my banking app. I know. It sounds simple. But in a marriage, money becomes background noise. Miles handled most of it. He liked it. He was good at it. And he framed it as his contribution. I'd let him take the lead because I trusted him. That trust was about to cost me everything. I pulled up our joint account and started scrolling. At first, it looked normal. Mortgage, utilities, grocery store, the occasional restaurant. Then I filtered for the last 6 months. And the pattern hit me like a slap. Every Thursday, a charge I didn't recognize. Not always the same amount, but always in the same cluster. A downtown hotel bar, a high-end restaurant, a car service, a boutique wine shop. Always Thursday, always between 3 p.m. and 11 p.m. I cross-checked with Miles's calendar because we shared one for the house stuff. Appointments, repairs, birthdays. Thursday blocks were labeled with variations of the same phrase. Versert client meeting. Raina, investor dinner. Compliance session. I felt my jaw tighten. He'd been documenting it, confident I'd never look. Then I found something that made my fingers go numb. A transfer. $9,500 from our savings to something labeled Harborlight Family Services, deposit. I stared at it, blinking. Harborlight Family Services. It sounded like a clinic, like something related to surrogacy. But we hadn't agreed to pay a deposit. We'd talked about consultations, not money moving. I clicked the transaction details. There was a note. Intake package finalized. My chest tightened. That's when my phone rang. Miles again. I watched it buzz, then let it die. 2 minutes later, a new number called. Unknown. My skin crawled. I answered anyway, because a part of me still wanted reality to be reasonable. A woman's voice, smooth as glass. Evan? It was Raina. I sat up straighter in the booth. Yes, I'm so glad you picked up. Her tone was warm, like we were friends. Miles said you left early. Are you feeling all right? I'm fine, I said, carefully. Why are you calling me? A tiny pause, so small most people wouldn't notice. But I've always been good at hearing systems. Patterns. Delays. Because, she said, Miles mentioned you two are taking exciting steps toward parenthood. I wanted to congratulate you. My throat went dry. Parenthood? I repeated. Yes, Raina said lightly. Harborlight has an excellent program. I've worked with them before. Miles is very lucky to have a partner willing to invest in the future. Invest. The word landed wrong. You've worked with them before, I said, keeping my voice steady. For what? Another pause, then a soft laugh. Oh, Evan, the details aren't important. What matters is you and Miles are moving forward. The details aren't important. But in Polish, she'd said, debt and baby. 2 hooks. I could practically feel the hooks sinking under my skin. I'm going to go, I said. Of course, Raina replied, still sweet. Just remember, Miles loves you. And this next chapter is going to require unity. Don't make it harder than it needs to be. Then she hung up. I stared at my phone like it had grown teeth. Unity. Don't make it harder. That wasn't congratulations. That was a warning. I paid my bill, drove home, and didn't go upstairs to our bedroom. I went straight to my small office, the one room in the house that still felt like mine. I opened my laptop and started pulling every statement, every transaction, and every document I could find. And somewhere between the hotel charges and the Harbor Light deposit, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't a single betrayal. It was a system. And if you've ever been the person who gives too much, who signs too quickly because love makes you soft, stay with me. Because you realized what I found next proved they weren't just cheating me. They were building a legal cage around me, one signature at a time. By morning, I hadn't slept. I'd sat in my office with a mug of coffee going cold, watching our financial life on a screen like a crime scene. When Miles came downstairs around 7, he looked like he'd practiced his face in the mirror. Soft eyes. Slight tremble in his mouth. Concern arranged perfectly. Evan, he said quietly, you scared me. I didn't answer right away. I studied him, really studied him, in a way I hadn't done in years. I realized I'd been looking at Miles through love, which is basically a filter that turns red flags into confetti. I heard you, I said. His eyebrows lifted. Heard me? At the museum, I said. In the hallway. His posture tightened for a second, then loosened again. Oh, he said, like he'd remembered something harmless. We were just talking. Raina was giving me feedback. In Polish, I said. A flicker crossed his face, fast, startled. Then he smiled. My Polish is terrible. You know that. I can barely order food. You told me you could, I said. Miles shrugged. I exaggerated. It's a work thing. Raina speaks it. I've been trying to learn basics. I watched him carefully. This was the moment where a truthful person would ask, why? How do you know what we said? Instead, Miles went straight to minimizing. Evan, he said gently, like I was a skittish animal, you're stressed. The baby stuff has you anxious. You probably misheard. My hands curled into fists under the desk. That was the trick, wasn't it? Make me doubt my senses. Make me doubt my mind. Make me feel guilty for questioning. I took a slow breath. Tell me about Harbor Light, I said. His expression froze. Then he laughed, too bright. Harbor Light? Evan, it's for us. It's the surrogacy clinic. I was surprising you. With our savings, I said. He stepped closer. Evan, listen. I know you like control. I know uncertainty makes you spiral. So I took initiative. It's a deposit. We can get it back. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. He opened his hands. Because every time we talk about it, you hesitate. You delay. You make spreadsheets. You turn our future into a math problem. My jaw clenched. He was blaming me for his secrecy. Tell me about Thursdays, I said. His eyes darted away. I told you clients. Hotel bars, I asked. Car services? Wine shops? His shoulders tightened. Then he did something I'd seen him do when cornered. He went soft. He sat on the edge of my office chair like he was collapsing. I've been under so much pressure, he whispered. Raina is demanding. The clients are demanding. I'm trying to build something for us. For the baby. For the baby. There it was again, weaponized. I stared at him and felt something inside me shift. Not rage. Not yet. Something colder. Did you and Raina talk about me in Polish last night? I asked. Miles looked up, eyes glassy. No. Did you say I'll sign anything? I asked. He swallowed. Evan. That's a yes, I said flatly. His silence was an answer with no courage. I want to see the Harbor Light paperwork, I said. He blinked. Why? Because my name is on the bank account, I said. And if there's a deposit, there are documents. Miles stood up slowly. Evan, you're making this adversarial. I almost laughed. Almost. Adversarial is forging your partner's consent, I said. Adversarial is moving money without telling me. Adversarial is your boss calling me at midnight to warn me about Unity. That shook him. His face tightened. You talked to Raina? He asked. Yes, I said, and I understand more than you think. He stared at me for a long moment, and for the first time his mask slipped. There was irritation there. Real irritation. Not fear. Not guilt. Annoyance. Like I was a dog that had learnt to open the latch. I'll get you the paperwork, he said finally, stiff. But you need to calm down. Then he walked out, leaving me in the office with the smell of his cologne and the realization that whatever this was, it wasn't going to be solved with a conversation. Because Miles wasn't sorry, Miles was inconvenienced. And somewhere out there, Raina Vaughn was counting on my weakness. I decided that morning that I'd stop being predictable, and by noon I made my first call to a lawyer recommended by a coworker who'd survived a brutal divorce. When the receptionist asked what the case involved, my voice came out steady, almost calm. My husband moved money, and I think he forged documents, I said. And I need to know what I'm legally tied to before it destroys me. Because something in my gut told me the real damage hadn't happened yet. It was still on the way. The paperwork didn't come from Miles. It came from the mail. 3 days after the gala, a thick envelope arrived with a return address that made my stomach drop. Atlantic Coastal Lending. Inside was a notice, not a friendly letter. A formal warning that an account was past due and that further delinquency could result in legal action, including liens against marital assets. I read it twice, then a third time, because my brain refused to accept it. The loan amount, $187,000. The borrower, Harbor Light Family Services, LLC. The guarantor, Evan Calder. My vision blurred. I didn't take out a loan. I didn't sign anything. My hands shook as I flipped pages. There it was, my name, printed clearly, with a signature that looked like mine if you'd seen it once and tried to imitate it quickly. I felt nauseous. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, listening to the quiet ticking of the old wall clock Miles had insisted we buy because it made the house feel classic. Classic. Like our marriage was a curated image. Miles came home that evening with groceries like nothing was wrong. He kissed my cheek. He hummed while putting lettuce in the fridge. I held up the loan notice. What is this? I asked. He froze mid-motion. For a moment I saw panic. Real panic. Then he schooled his face. Where did you get that? The mail, I said. Miles, what is this? He set the groceries down slowly. It's temporary, he said. It's bridge financing. For what? My voice rose. For surrogacy? He exhaled hard. Evan, calm down. Don't tell me to calm down, I snapped. My name is on a loan for almost $200,000. He rubbed his temples. It's not a big deal. It's how these programs work sometimes. You finance, then you refinance once everything is finalized. Finalized, I repeated. What exactly is being finalized? Miles hesitated. That hesitation felt like the floor giving way. I reached into the envelope and pulled out the attachment listing services billed under the program. It wasn't just consultation fees. It was detailed. Egg donor match, completed. Embryo creation, completed. Carrier match, completed. Initial medical confirmation, scheduled. My mouth went dry. Miles, I said, voice shaking, have you already started this process? His eyes flicked away. It's for us. Did you create embryos? I demanded. Did you do that without me? He looked back at me, and his voice changed. Not soft. Sharp. You said you wanted a family, he said. You just never want to move. I wanted a family with consent, I said. With discussion. With both of us, he scoffed. You act like I robbed a bank. You forged my signature, I said. That's not nothing. Miles stepped closer, lowering his voice. Evan, listen. If you blow this up, you'll ruin everything. Everything? I laughed once, dry, broken. You mean your career? Your relationship with Raina? He flinched at her name. Then I knew. How long? I asked quietly. How long have you been sleeping with her? Miles' face tightened. I'm not. Don't, I said. Don't lie to me. I heard you. I understood you. He went pale. What did you hear? He whispered. The dead, I said, and the baby. His eyes closed. And when he opened them, the truth crawled out, not in words, but in the resignation in his shoulders. Raina didn't want a scandal. Raina wanted control. And Miles wanted the life Raina promised him. So what's the baby hook? I asked, voice low. What did you mean? Miles swallowed. It's complicated. No, I said. It's simple. Tell me. He stared at the floor like it was easier than looking at me. The carrier, he said finally. The surrogate. She's already in motion. My skin went cold. And where am I in this? Miles looked up. Legally, you're the second parent. Once the paperwork is filed, once the process is underway, it's hard to undo. I felt like I was going to throw up. You tried to bind me, I whispered. It's our family, he snapped, suddenly angry. You act like I'm trapping you, but you need this too. You just don't know it. I stared at him, and in my head I heard Raina's laugh again. 2 hooks. Debt and baby. I stood up slowly, hands braced on the table. You didn't start a family, I said. You built a leash. Miles's eyes glistened. Evan, please. I held up a hand. No, I said. You don't get to please me now. Not after you signed my name like I'm a tool. And if you think that was the worst part, if you think forged loans and secret surrogacy are as low as it goes, stay with me. Because the next thing I found proved they weren't just trying to keep me. They were planning to use me as the fall guy when it all collapsed. I moved out that night. Not dramatically, no screaming scene. No suitcase thrown downstairs. I packed a duffel bag with clothes, my laptop, my passport, and the folder of loan documents like they were a bomb I needed to keep away from him. I drove to my friend Derek's apartment near Back Cove. Derek didn't ask questions. He just opened the door, saw my face, and said, Couch or spare room? Spare room, I croaked. That first night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant hum of the city and the occasional groan of pipes in Derek's old building. I kept replaying the same image, Miles at our kitchen table, telling me he'd created a baby without my consent, like it was a romantic surprise. I felt humiliated, not just betrayed. I felt used in a way that stripped my skin off. Because here's the truth about people like me, people who were trained young to be good and helpful. We don't just give love. We give access to money, to stability, to legal protection, to emotional labor. And the wrong person will turn that generosity into a weapon. By morning, I wasn't crying anymore. I was planning. I met with my lawyer, Marissa Keys, in a downtown office that smelled like lemon cleaner and sharp professionalism. Marissa was the kind of woman who didn't waste words. She flipped through my documents, her jaw tightening more with every page. This is serious, she said. I know, I replied. You didn't sign any of this? No, I said. And the signature is close enough to confuse someone who wants to believe it. Marissa nodded. We'll treat this as fraud until proven otherwise. What about the surrogacy? I asked, voice tight. If there's a baby, if there's paperwork, can I be forced into that? Marissa's eyes sharpened. We need to move fast. There are ways to challenge consent. There are also ways to notify the clinic that your signature is disputed. But we need documentation and timing. Timing. That word became my anchor. Because I wanted justice. But I didn't want chaos. I didn't want a messy, loud public explosion that could bounce back on me. I wanted precision. So I built a list. Secure my assets and credit. Prove fraud. Stop any legal binding related to parenthood. Expose Raina's role without giving her warning. Leave Miles with consequences he couldn't spin into a victim narrative. Marissa helped me freeze what I could, monitoring my credit, flagging suspicious accounts, limiting access. She also advised me to stop speaking to Miles directly. Miles will try to manipulate you, she said. That's his pattern. Let him talk through attorneys. I wanted to argue. A part of me still wanted to believe I could talk him into decency. But Marissa's expression told me something I needed to accept. This wasn't about decency. This was about damage control. Next, I hired a forensic accountant. Her name was Nisha Patel, and she had the calm stare of someone who'd seen every kind of financial ugliness humans could invent. Nisha traced the money like it was blood spatter. Within a week, she found additional transfers, small ones at first, hidden under normal household categories. Grocery, $312, but it was a luxury cosmetics shop. Home repair, $480, but it was a car service. Medical, $1,200, but it was Harbor Light again, routed through a payment portal. Miles hadn't just moved money. He'd disguised it. And every disguise told me the same thing he expected me not to notice. Because he thought I was passive. While Nisha worked, Marissa filed an emergency petition to contest the loan guarantor signature and to request temporary restraining orders related to marital financial conduct. Legal words. Heavy words. Necessary words. Then I did the hardest part. I contacted Harbor Light, not with anger, not with threats, with a lawyer. Marissa and I met with their compliance officer, a tired-looking man who suddenly became very alert when he saw a forged signature in writing. He said all the right things. We take consent seriously. We'll review our documentation. We'll pause proceedings if necessary. But I could see in his eyes he was already calculating risk. Clinics like Harbor Light don't want lawsuits. They don't want scandal, which meant they would act, if I gave them enough reason. So I did. Marissa provided proof that my signature was disputed, and that a legal action was underway. We requested a full copy of every document containing my name, every date, every witness, every notary, and that's when the next brick fell out of the wall. Because one of those documents wasn't just about surrogacy. It was a parentage agreement, already drafted, already scheduled for filing, and listed as pending final signatures. My signature was on it. Fake. Miles had planned to file it quickly before I could stop it. Before I could breathe. It wasn't just a baby hook. It was a legal trap designed to make me responsible for a child conceived without my consent, while also tying me to a loan that could ruin my credit and possibly my home. I sat in Derek's spare room that night, staring at the parentage agreement, feeling my pulse thud behind my eyes. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Miles. Please. We can fix this. Don't do anything rash. Raina says you're overreacting. Raina says. Like she was his conscience now. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a new folder on my laptop and labeled it The Blueprint. Because if they built a cage with paperwork, I'd dismantle it with evidence. And the next step was obvious. If Raina Vaughn was comfortable discussing fraud in Polish in a museum hallway, what else had she been hiding behind money and charm? The trap only works if the other person believes you're still trapped. So for 2 weeks, I played quiet. I didn't respond to Miles. I didn't show up at the house. I let him think my lawyer was just posturing. I let Raina assume her intimidation had worked. Behind the scenes, everything was moving. Nisha found the pattern that mattered most. The loan wasn't just tied to surrogacy. It was tied to Von Shore Capital. There were payments routed through a shell company that, on paper, looked like a family services facilitator, but in reality, it fed money into an investment vehicle Raina controlled. Miles hadn't just forged my name for a baby. He'd used my identity to secure financing that served Raina's interests. And if that financing collapsed, guess whose name would be attached? Mine. Marissa's eyes were cold when she said it. They were going to let you take the hit, so we timed our moves. First, Marissa formally notified the lender that the guarantor's signature was disputed and under legal challenge. That triggered an internal fraud review. Second, Harbor Light received a formal demand to pause any filings related to parentage until consent disputes were resolved. They complied. Quietly. Quickly. Third, I filed a report with my credit bureaus and placed additional protections on my identity. Fourth, I met with a private investigator. His name was Jonah Briggs, ex-corporate security. The kind of man who asked questions like he already knew the answers. Jonah's job wasn't to spy. It was to gather legally obtained facts, public records, business relationships, documented timelines. And Jonah found something that made Raina's hallway arrogance look childish. Raina had done this before. Not the baby part. Different story. Different victim. But the same method. Attach someone else's name to risk, then insulate herself behind complex structures and charming deniability. Now I needed one more lever. The kind of lever that didn't come from courts. It came from consequences. Raina had a husband, Graham Vaughn. Yes, her last name matched because she'd built her brand around it, but Graham was the one with generational money, old New England wealth that didn't need to advertise itself. He also had something else, reputation sensitivity, the kind of man who didn't scream, didn't rant. He simply removed people from his world like they never existed. I didn't contact Graham directly. I sent an anonymous packet to his attorney's office. No threats, no drama, just copies. The lender notice with my forged signature. The transaction trails Nisha documented. The timeline of Thursdays. A screenshot of Miles's calendar entries. And one line printed at the top. Your wife's business is using other people's identities to finance private ventures. Verify. Then I waited. Because if Graham Vaughn was anything like people said, he wouldn't confront Raina first. He'd investigate quietly, just like I had. And on a rainy Tuesday morning, the dominoes fell. Miles called me from an unknown number, voice shaking, breath uneven. Evan, he whispered. What did you do? I leaned back in my chair at Derek's kitchen table. What happened? Raina's lawyers, Graham. There are investigators at the office, Miles stammered. Compliance is asking questions. They pulled my badge. They're saying fraud. They're saying identity theft. I kept my voice calm. Did you forge my signature, Miles? Silence. Then a broken whisper. I didn't think it would get this big. You didn't think, I said flatly, because you thought I'd just sign and smile. He started crying. Actual crying. And if this were old me, that sound would have cracked me open. I would have rushed to soothe him, to fix it, to rescue him from the consequences of his choices. But old me didn't exist anymore. What do you want? I asked. I need help, he said. Raina is blaming me. She's saying I acted alone. She's saying I misunderstood instructions. Evan, please, if I go down for this. You mean if you go down for what you did, I corrected. He sobbed harder. I'm scared. Good. Not because I wanted suffering. Because fear is sometimes the only teacher people like Miles ever meet. I ended the call with 2 sentences. Tell the truth to your lawyer, and don't contact me again unless it's through mine. Then I sat there, staring at the rain sliding down Derek's window, feeling a strange mix of grief and relief. Because the plan wasn't revenge for revenge's sake. It was survival. And if you've ever been underestimated by someone who thinks your kindness is stupidity, stay with me. because what happened next proved something important. When a manipulator loses their shield, they don't become remorseful. They become dangerous. The public version of what happened looked tidy. Internal investigation. Administrative leave. Legal disputes. But the real aftermath was messy, intimate, and exhausting. Raina Vaughn didn't go quietly. Within days, her attorneys filed motions accusing me of harassment, of defamation, of attempting to extort her by fabricating claims. They tried to paint me as a disgruntled spouse attacking her because I was jealous. It was almost impressive how quickly she tried to flip the narrative. Marissa handled it with the calm brutality of someone who'd been underestimated before. She can claim whatever she wants, Marissa told me. Evidence doesn't care about her story. And we had evidence. The lender's fraud team confirmed irregularities. Harborlight confirmed the parentage agreement had been submitted with questionable verification. Compliance at Von Shore Capital uncovered internal emails referencing creative guarantor solutions, and suddenly Raina's polished world didn't look so untouchable. Miles, meanwhile, spiraled. He showed up at Derek's building one night, pounding on the door until Derek threatened to call the cops. I watched from the hallway peephole, heart hardening. Miles looked wrecked, hair messy, eyes swollen, hands shaking. Evan, he shouted, "Please, just talk to me." Derek turned to me. "You want me to make him leave?" I nodded. Derek opened the door just enough to speak. "He's not here for you." "Leave." Miles tried to wedge his foot in. Derek shoved the door closed. Miles's voice broke on the other side. "I'm sorry." And for a second, just a second, I felt something twist in my chest. Not forgiveness. Memory. The memory of the man I thought I married. But memory is not reality. I walked away from the door. Because here's what people don't tell you. Closure isn't a single satisfying moment. It's 1,000 small decisions to not reopen the wound. The legal process crawled forward. Marissa got the court to issue temporary financial protections. The lender paused aggressive collection while fraud was investigated. Harborlight officially halted filings. Then the biggest development hit. Graham Vaughn filed for divorce. Not loudly, not with scandalous interviews, but with legal weight. Raina's accounts were scrutinized. Her business partnerships started vanishing like smoke. People who had once laughed at her jokes suddenly couldn't fit her into their schedule. Old money doesn't scream. It erases. As Raina's world shrank, she tried one last tactic. She called my mother. Yes, my mother. I found out because my mom rang me afterward, voice tight. "Evan," she said, "there's a woman who says she works with Miles. She says you're ruining his life out of spite." I felt my stomach drop. Did she say her name? "Raina," my mother replied. She sounded practiced. That's the only word. Practiced. I closed my eyes. "I'm sorry," I said. "Mom, I didn't want you involved." My mother's voice hardened. "Evan, she's calling me to intimidate me. That tells me everything I need to know," I swallowed. "What did you say?" I said, my mother replied, that if anyone forged my son's signature, they deserve whatever they get. I almost cried, not from sadness, but from relief, from being believed. Because gaslighting makes you hungry for simple validation. The divorce finalized faster than most. Miles' attorney advised him to settle quietly. His position at the firm evaporated. He lost the leverage he'd been counting on. Without Raina's protection, he was just a man who committed fraud and tried to trap his spouse. He signed the papers Marissa put in front of him. This time, he signed his own consequences. The surrogacy piece dissolved in a different kind of sadness. The surrogate, who I'd never met, was informed the parentage filing was disputed. She backed out. The clinic restructured their process. Somewhere out there, a woman avoided being pulled into a legal war she never asked for. And the baby Miles had tried to use as a hook? It never became real. Not as our child, not as our future, just as a symbol of what he was willing to do to keep control. Months later, on a Saturday morning, I sat in a coffee shop near the Eastern Promenade, looking at the water. The sky was pale, the ocean calm, and for once my mind wasn't racing. That's when a man asked, "Is this seat taken?" I looked up. Wire-frame glasses, warm eyes, a messenger bag stuffed with student papers, slight gray at his temples like a soft warning that time had been lived, not just spent. "Go ahead," I said. He smiled. "Thanks." "I'm Noah Lang." I shook his hand. "Evan." He sat down, pulled out papers, and muttered under his breath, "If I read the phrase in conclusion one more time, I might lose my will to live." I laughed, an actual laugh. Noah looked at me, amused. "Rough week?" I hesitated, then said something I hadn't said in a long time without feeling shame. "I got out of something bad." Noah nodded slowly, like he understood without needing details. "Then you deserve coffee that doesn't taste like punishment," he said. And for the first time since the museum hallway, I felt a flicker of something I thought I'd lost. Curiosity about what comes next. Because justice is satisfying, but healing is the part nobody applauds, and I wasn't sure yet how to do it. A year after the gala, Portland looked different to me. Same streets, same sea air, same tourists taking pictures of lobster rolls like it was a spiritual experience. But my life, my internal life, had changed in ways I couldn't explain to the person I used to be. I moved back into my house alone. At first, the silence was brutal. Every creak in the stairs sounded like a memory. Every empty space in the closet felt like a verdict. But over time, the house became mine again. Not ours, not the life we built, but the place where I learned to stop signing myself away. I repainted the office. New desk. New lamp. I put a framed photo of Babcia Teresa on the bookshelf, her stern face and sharp eyes like a reminder. They can't steal what you know. The legal consequences for Reina were complicated. She didn't end up in a dramatic courtroom scene like a movie villain. Reality is less cinematic. But she lost what mattered to her. Her firm dissolved under investigation and partner withdrawals. Her social circle evaporated. Graham's divorce filings exposed more financial misconduct than she'd expected, enough that she spent months in settlements and hearings that bled her power away. Reina survived, technically. But she never recovered her throne. Miles ended up taking a job in a small accounting office in a neighboring town. Quiet, low profile. A fraction of the prestige he'd chased. I heard it through mutual acquaintances, not from him. He tried to message me once, months after the divorce. A simple text. "I hope you're okay. I think about what I ruined every day." I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. Not because I wanted him to suffer. Because I didn't want him to keep a thread into my life, even through remorse. Noah, on the other hand, became a steady presence. We didn't rush into anything. No dramatic declarations. No "you saved me" nonsense. We just spent time together. Coffee, walks. Dinner in small places where nobody cared who you were. Conversations that didn't feel like negotiations. One night, months into knowing him, Noah asked me something simple while we stood on my porch looking at the harbor lights. "Do you ever miss him?" he asked. I thought about it. I thought about the version of Miles who held my hand at City Hall. The version who cried over the house papers. The version who talked about a baby with hope in his voice. Then I thought about forged signatures, Thursday rituals, and two hooks. "I miss what I believed," I said finally. "Not who he actually was." Noah nodded. "That's a clean answer." And it was. Because that's what freedom looked like for me now. Clean answers. Not confusion. Not chasing the truth through someone else's performance. Just clarity. On the anniversary of the gala, I went to the cemetery where Babcia Teresa was buried in Chicago. Yes, I drove 12 hours because I needed to. I brought flowers, sat on the grass, and told her out loud what her language had saved me from. Thanks, I said, feeling ridiculous and grateful at the same time. You taught me words. They tried to use words against me. It didn't work. The wind moved through the trees like a quiet response. When I drove back to Maine, I felt lighter, not because everything had been fixed, but because I had stopped being the kind of man who thought love meant sacrificing himself without question. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt trapped in a relationship where you're constantly doubting your own senses, where someone tells you you're overreacting when your gut is screaming, please hear me. Your perception is not the problem. Their behavior is, and you're allowed to stop signing your life away just to keep the peace. All right, before I go, I want to hear from you. What would you have done in my place? Would you have confronted them immediately, or would you have planned quietly like I did? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If this story hit you, if you've ever been underestimated, manipulated, or treated like your kindness was weakness, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more stories where people finally reclaim their power. And here's the question I'll leave you with, the one I wish someone had asked me sooner.